It's Tom Albright with AVNation with an AVNation special. We are highlighting the SCN Hall of Fame for 2020, what the SCN does, and our buddy Megan Dutta. She highlights a number of industry personalities, industry executives, and folks who have made a difference in the industry. And with me today to talk about his induction into the SCN Hall of Fame is Rodrigo Ordóñez. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Tim. Good morning.
Rodrigo is a principal at K2 out in Boulder, Colorado, and I said this to you off of the air before we started recording, but as a former programmer, good God, you have a lot of really great certifications, dude.
Thank you.
So you check out K2, and Rodrigo is got the AMX, he's got a bunch of other stuff. But let's talk about kind of where you have been, and then kind of what has led you to this point. Start for a second and kind of a general overarching question it's fun to find out where people are from in this industry is how did you get involved in AV?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I always say I'm a frustrated rock star by nature. That's where I come from.
That's 95% of the AV industry, just for the record.
So like many others, I wanted to be either on the stage or behind the board, right? So I did my master's in music engineering technology at the University of Miami. So really wanting to be in the studio business. And halfway through it, I after seeing what some other folks experience in their internships and other things at studios, I decided that that was not necessarily what I wanted for me. So I started looking at other options. And somehow, when I was looking for work, I really thought I was going to end up in engineering, somewhere in electronics. Making the guitars instead of playing the guitars. But my advisor back then kind of put me in the direction of a friend of his who was a contractor out in California. And I had one phone call with her, and it just kind of totally changed my perspective, because as many of us in this industry, I had no idea this industry existed. So she pointed me to a few options. I applied and got an offer for a company I didn't know and a town I had never been in, and decided that there were a lot of other options, so I might as well give it a shot. And I just had really good luck. I love it here. The company I went to was great, and then I found the opportunity with back then Peak Audio, which most of us from the consulting side of Peak Audio moved over to K2. And so I've been, with the same group at K2 now for 15, 16 years. Well, with the same group for almost 20 years, but as K2 for 15 years now. So it's, a lot of good luck. And as I always say, like I was still kind of figuring it out. And then I went to my first Infocom show in Orlando in 2003, I think, 2002, something like that. And it just totally transformed my life. Like it just, it was so much fun. And I was like, oh, this is actually a cool work to be in. Like it just, everything seemed so spectacular and amazing that it was, I think like a lot of others, all the blinking lights and everything just did it for me. Yeah, I got on the roll and decided this was the life for me, and, got committed.
That story right there is so similar to a lot, including, my own, my first Infocom as well was, not just, it was the blinking lights, right? It really was. It was the technology, and it was the experience of walking up and down the aisle going, okay, this is what's really possible. And it is amazing to me, especially in this year where, with the exception of ISC, there hasn't been a show, right? There hasn't been one of those experiences, and not sure exactly when we'll get back to that. So, that's very similar to a bunch of other folks and kind of their experience in getting wrapped in. Talk me through though, if folks aren't familiar with how you go from wanting to or looking at the front of house board, right, and getting from there to consultancy. What is it about being a consultant that kind of still drives that desire and still drives that AV edge for you?
Yeah, so for me, beside the artistic part, I was always pretty geeky on technology and engineering. So that's why I, ended up going for music engineering and not just music recording, because I like the nuts and bolts of things. So when I got into consulting and was able to find a group where, we weren't just looking at kind of off the shelf stuff and, finding catalogs and figuring out this can go here, but really trying to come up with the right solution for the different systems. And we did a lot of custom, we still do, but even then more just custom engineering, custom products, custom solutions for our clients. That really drove or kind of fulfilled my internal engineering side. And it kept it, very dynamic. It was interesting because, again, coming from wanting to be a rock star for about 10 years, 99% of what I did was legislative spaces. So, hearing rooms and, courtrooms and things like that, which if you ask any 18-year-old that wants to be a rock star, if they want to be working doing legislative spaces, that would probably be the last answer they would give you. But they were so technologically heavy, and we had the ability to do very creative things within that environment that it really showed me a side of not just audio and video, but technology that I didn't really appreciate existed. And it was funny because at some point I almost forgot that I was in it for the audio, which is really what got me into it, even though I still love it. But I started realizing I was focusing a lot more on whether, the monitoring was working and whether I could see the right lights and see the right things happening. And, sometimes even forgetting like, oh, this system also needs to sound pretty good besides all this working, right? All this network stuff and all this. So I really just got totally, fascinated by the technology side of it. And I think that's what keeps me going even to this day, is to keep finding not just new technologies, but creative ways to use old and new technology to put things out there that clients just don't expect. Because most of our clients and all of our people that use AV, which has really become the masses, they have an expectation based on what they have at their house, was based on what they've seen in another office, and really trying to surprise them and show them that there's a lot more beyond what they expect. That to me is a big driving force in what I do.
I mentioned the fact that you got your AMX certification. You've also got CTSD, CompTIA Network Plus, which is quite interesting, and I want to kind of go down this road for a second. There's been a lot made of the last 20 years of the convergence, and I am of the opinion that may not be popular, but that it's done, it's over. It's the horse has left the barn. We're there, right? So talk about for a second the last 20 years, the last 17 years since your first Infocom, and that evolution where, yes, you wanted to be on stage, you want to be in front of house, but you've worked now and it's evolved to where you've got your Network Plus for a reason, right? Because it's necessary in what you do on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think, the main evolution that I've seen, at least, definitely in me, but I think in the industry overall, and I agree with you. I think when I keep hearing like, we're working on this convergence, I think that happened many years ago, and we shouldn't be talking about it that way. But the main difference I see is how we communicate, in AV, and how knowledgeable we are as AV professionals of the networking side of things. So, we used to focus on whether a product could be networked and then IP, and like we have jacks and we can plug them in, but we really had an AV mindset towards the application of networking in AV. We still wanted, or and sometimes we still want to think of network as an AV solution versus trying to really use the flexibility and what a network provides to expand what AV can do. And I think that's the evolution I've seen. Before it's like it's utility, like let's put a network jack because people are asking for it, and let's see what it can do to provide an AV service. And now it's like, let's take, with streaming, becoming, kind of all over in video and other things, we are seeing more of a, how can we take the AV we know of and really expand it with what network provides. And on the CompTIA and some other things, I think to me what's always been key, and mostly because I got embarrassed in some early conversations, that's how you learn. When I got to sit in front of an IT guy at a stadium, and he asked me some questions, and I said something stupid, and then the whole conversation went downhill, and I didn't get what I wanted. I figured out, well, I better learn about this thing, because if I can't talk to these guys, then I'm never going to be able to have an impact and really push through what we're trying to do from an AV side. So, that's where the CompTIA certification came from, but also just in general, just trying to know and learn as much about the IT side, but not just as it comes from AV, but as they learn it, right? I mean, try to learn IT the way IT professionals learn it, and try to understand the terminology and the concepts, so that, when they bring it, just like us, we have some very specific way we talk about things, and IT professionals in the IT world have very specific ways they talk about things as well. And so I think it's critical for us, overall as AV, to be able to talk not just the same language, but in the same way as they do.
Well, I kind of want to have you drill down on that, because there are so many folks who have written and talked about, we need to have the same language as IT. We need to do this, that, and the other. We need. I've even heard it argue we need to educate the IT industry on how we talk. And I think that sometimes that's the wrong approach. You went about and got your Network Plus because that's how IT talks, right? So you learned how your customers, quite frankly, and the folks that are the gatekeepers for the network talk, so you could talk to them. Explain to someone who's sitting here at maybe, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I started an RS-232, with my eyes shut in 1999. I'm okay. Explain to them the difference between that and really kind of understanding how the network works, but also how the customer talks today versus how they did 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I don't think one thing necessarily goes against the other. I mean, I think it is important for us to figure out ways to engage, IT professionals and just the outside world in general to understand how AV talks, right? And how we approach AV. The more they understand where we're coming from, obviously, the easier it's going to be for them to listen to us and embrace what we're trying to do. But that is never going to work if we don't also do the opposite and try to, understand, how they're communicating. And one of the biggest issues I see with AV and IT is similar to what you said, right? Like, we keep talking about where's the convergence going to happen? And it happened 15 years ago. And just like that, like, we go, IC, IT, informational classes, materials, and everything for AV, and it does seem like we're still in 1986. Like, the things, the concepts we're learning and the way we're learning them are just not the way modern IT folks are working. I'll give you an example. So I'm working on a network plant design for broad, kind of video distribution, but very broadcast heavy, with a lot of SMPTE 2110 and other kind of newer video standards. And, I went ahead and reached out to a few switch network platform manufacturers, and the way they communicate about what the topology should be, what you should do to basically design that solution and design that network, has absolutely nothing to do with how traditional AV would be put forward, right? And how we would design our systems, and then look at the network plant as a replacement to a switcher, basically, right? And so if we try to design, towards those technologies that are driven from IT, they're not being driven by AV. If we keep thinking in our AV mindset and try to design in an AV-centric way, we're not going to, one, fulfill the potential of what those technologies can give us, but also we're probably going to be running into a lot of issues because we're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, right? We're not really attacking the solution correctly because that technology it's not designed with an AV mindset. And so we can't just fit it by doing that.
I wish I could take you and put you on top of a mountain with a megaphone, dude. I really, really do.
Well, one interesting thing, because you mentioned like traditional, and one example is electrical, right? Like, it's the same concept. Like, we can't just say, oh, I'm just going to go to that electrical contractor and tell them you have to learn AV and forget about it. You have to learn electrical, and AV has known for a while. We have to understand what grounding is, what power is. So it's hard to understand why we say, yeah, but I don't care about learning IT. Well, it's the same thing. It's peripheral disciplines and technologies that if we don't learn about them, we can't really communicate with them.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. So without breaking any NDAs, and again, NDA stands for non-disclosure agreement. That's kind of my rule. If I use an acronym, I got to just define it. What's some of the coolest project you've worked on? Maybe not even the coolest, just the ones that you've been most proud of at the end of the day when you walk into the facility once it's done and the dust has been cleaned off and you guys are doing the the final walkthrough, the grand opening, what are some of the ones that you've been most proud of and go, that I had a hand in that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, definitely my baby for many years was a lot of the work we did for the US Senate out in Washington, DC. So, I did the system designs and configuration and programming for most of the hearing rooms that are running on Capitol Hill. Most of them on the Senate and quite a few on the House. And again, if you would have asked me 20 years ago, that would seem like a pretty simple thing for me, like, oh, it's just a bunch of microphones, but there's just a really amazing amount of technology behind those systems. They kind of revolutionized the way that everything became, network-based, and here we're talking about early 2000s, everything network-based, central monitoring, a lot of the things that kind of we were talking about back then, but that were not really being implemented yet in projects we were putting through. And it's a 10, 12-year project, and in the end, all through it, as rooms were coming online, it was very fulfilling. But see it at the end and see all the systems be upgraded, and it's very visible because you can turn TV and see the system you did on TV, and so it definitely was kind of a proud thing to be involved in, and I still love the fact that that was part of what I did. And then I think you mentioned the programming side at the beginning, and I'm a big sports fan. I love sports, football, soccer, anything, but football and soccer especially. But I will be at a stadium anytime you ask me to be at a stadium. I just love it for whatever event it is. And so I've worked in a few NFL stadiums, a couple college stadiums, and those are always just amazing. Mostly on the programming side, programming the DSP systems for them. But there's few things that compare. Just like people that work at Life Sound. When you're finished with a job and you pump AC/DC at 10 p.m. with an empty stadium and can listen to it loud, it's pretty fulfilling.
I can only imagine. And he's out in Colorado, so that stadium has to be. If you've not been there, you should definitely make a trek there. And as a Bears fan, Soldier Field is unique in that as well. As it's an out. And just personally, I like the outdoor stadiums. Nothing wrong with indoor. Being from St. Louis, we have our dome here. Nobody's there now, but we have a dome. Whatever. Rodrigo, and I did not mean to get over into sports for a second, but as we wrap up here, take a look at the next year or so, and I'm not going to say take COVID out of it because you can't, right? But because that not for nothing, but that will have an impact on some of the technology, at least that's being released in the next 12 months, maybe 18 months. But take a look at the industry as you see it, right? And from your unique perspective, and kind of give me, what do you see happening for the next year, maybe the next 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, it's funny because it's one of those questions that's been asked probably, a lot this year in every setting. And it's changed over the past 8 months how people have answered it, right? Obviously, the answer in January would have nothing to do with the answer right now. But even
Amen, brother.
The past 3-4 months, it's varied a lot. I think, I think it'll be very interesting to see how much we can't, it's really difficult these days. Like you said, it's hard to take COVID out of it, but it's very difficult to take even the society response that will happen over the next 2 or 3 years to end the industry, right? But I think AV in general, like what happens with the workspace will affect AV significantly. What happens with higher ed and all the educational environments will affect AV significantly. I've mentioned corporate, but even government facilities, everything. So I think what will be very interesting to see is how AV reacts to that change, because I think right now there's a lot of things that a lot of people are doing right to address the situation short term. And a lot of those will remain long term. Obviously, collaboration and remote stuff, Zoom, WebEx, all this is here to stay, and it's going to become more and more prevalent. There's no question, big companies are not going to be able to get 100% of their workforce back to the office in 6 months. But how much overreaction is happening versus what is going to remain as the change in 2-3 years? I think to me, that's the key as we design systems, as we design products, and as we integrate it, as everything we do in AV, because it's not fair on our customers for us right now to address, if I'm contracted to do a design tomorrow, and I just address it looking at the reality today in this crazy world of 2020, then I think I'm not going to be being fair and really providing a good product or solution to my client in 2-3 years, right? Because we're going to be in a different reality once things adapt. I keep saying this year, and maybe I'm just trying to convince myself because I'm an optimist more than anything, but that I think human nature will get the best of us, and
Yep.
we'll all be back together. There'll be people need to be together. They need to work together. We see it at my office. We've been able to work really well remotely, but we're dying to be together and be able to talk for a little bit in person and do those kind of things. So there's I have no doubt that there's going to be a huge pendulum swing coming back at some point after the COVID isolation year, basically. And I think we need to be very mindful to on the AV technology, design, systems, everything, to keep that in mind and be fair in how we're approaching things and not be short-sighted to just overreact. And I'm not trying to minimize that it's a big deal and we need to take some really intense and strong actions right now. But I think we need to be smart and make sure we look at the at least the midterm picture, the next 4 or 5 years, and not just the next 4 or 5 months.
That's a great point, and I'm with you on the optimism. So, Rodrigo Ordóñez from K2, but also I the newest member of the SCN Hall of Fame. Thank you, sir. How do people get a hold of you or K2?
Well, through our website, this is k2.com. That's how you can find out more about K2. My email is, rodrigo@k2adt.com, and I'm always happy to hear from people. So, you can find us or find myself on LinkedIn. I always also like to hear from people that way. So, yeah.
Very cool. Thank you so much. Absolutely. Rodrigo Ordóñez from K2, SCN Hall of Fame. For us, for AVNation, go by our website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv. You'll find this program and a host of others, including an interview with all the other SCN Hall of Famers. We'll be releasing these. I don't know what order we're doing this in. That's entirely up to Mitchell, my producer. So he will put these out. So check those out as well at avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.